It is time I return to my X-Men.
The Professor and his X-Men first appeared in the Marvel superheroes in 1966, but they weren't called the X-Men, they were the Allies for Peace and replaced the Fantastic Four. But Hanna-Barbera had the rights to the first family, so the X-Men replaced them in the story, just with a different name for some unknown reason. Professor X looks sharp in a blue suit in his first appearance.
It is possible that you have come in peace, in which case you won't mind us checking out the building.
Season 2 of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends featured Professor X in the Iceman and Firestar origin episodes. He later had a larger role in the series, training Spider-Man in the Danger Room within the X-Mansion. Throughout his appearances, he consistently wears a blue blazer and a mustard yellow cravat.
Yes, we're in the sub-basement. That means we've got to go up past all the traps on all the floors.
Many people think the 1992 animated series was the first standalone X-Men show, but a 1989 pilot called X-Men: Pryde of the X-Men actually paved the way for the iconic 90s series. Wearing a gray turtleneck sweater and green blazer, this paved the way for future appearances. But his legs are covered by a brown blanket, and his chair is more like a standard wheelchair without iconography. This makes him just look like any other old man.
You've always been welcome in my home, Kane. It's your choice of friends I question.
In 1992, we finally got the animated series the X-Men deserved, and Professor X appeared in his green blazer, shirt, and tie, riding his bulky yellow hover chair. Oh, and those eyebrows are iconic. This animated version of the character was a heavy inspiration for so many future appearances of the character across both animated shows and live-action movies, including a full recreation of the look for a certain cameo, but we'll get to that later. The stories took inspiration from many different comic book arcs, but you can't get more iconic for Professor X than watching him face off against his old nemesis Magneto, which he did in Episode 4, Deadly Reunions. In the final moments of the show's last season, Charles is shown lying in a hospital bed, and it seems he passes away. But his beloved Lilandra arrives, offering hope with a potential cure, and she takes him with her to the Shi'ar homeworld.
We cannot afford to lose again, or Magneto and those like him will prevail.
The series existed in the same universe as Spider-Man, the animated series, and the Professor featured in a crossover in 1995. Spider-Man's progressing mutation is causing him to get sick, and he seeks help from Professor X. In doing so, he runs into the X-Men who attack him for trespassing until Professor X breaks up the conflict. When we think of Professor X, most of us would think of the legend that is Patrick Stewart, and he stepped into the role for the first time in 2000's X-Men. The big chair is gone in favor of something more stripped back, and he wears a dark suit to match the dark leather costumes his team wears. This first live-action film appearance is set in the classic story of the struggle between Xavier and Magneto, with their teams squaring off against each other.
If no one is equipped to oppose them, humanity's days could be over.
In X-Men Evolution, also from 2000, we got a new take on the animated Charles, with a mix between the animated series and the Pryde of the X-Men look, a stripped-back chair like the movies, and a more casual sweater and blazer. The animation style captured his wise persona perfectly. In his standout appearance during the two-part series finale Ascension, he falls victim to Apocalypse's brainwashing, becoming one of his horsemen until the X-Men ultimately rescue him.
I think you know Kitty is going through a very unique transition. We simply want to help her through it.
In 2003's X2 X-Men United, a sequel to the live-action movie from 2000, saw the return of Stewart to the role he made his own. This time, he was kidnapped by Stryker and his team, with the end goal of using a new Cerebro machine, controlling Xavier's mind and forcing him to use the machine to kill all the mutants on the planet. Luckily, the team, helped by Nemesis Magneto this time, make it to him just in time.
We're here to stay, Mr. President. The next move is yours.
That was then followed by X-Men: The Last Stand 2006. In a sad twist, Professor X seemingly meets his end at the hands of Jean Grey, who has become the Dark Phoenix. He tries to help her control this powerful force, but it goes terribly wrong. In the end, Xavier unexpectedly finds a way to survive by transferring his mind into a comatose patient.
You must trust me. You're a danger to everyone and yourself, but I can help you.
The Professor also appeared in Robot Chicken, dating back to 2006. He appears in one sketch, telepathically telling his team to be careful before they get disintegrated. This leads him to search for a new team, but instead of mutants, which are in short supply, he takes on the cast of Police Academy instead.
Some mischief maker has gone to great lengths to hide a prostitute under my podium.
In 2009, a new animated series, Wolverine and the X-Men, aired. For this show, Professor X is out of action for the most part. A year before the series begins, a confrontation with the Phoenix Force leaves him in a coma. He's taken to Genosha, where Magneto surprisingly looks after him until the X-Men retrieve him and return him to the X-Mansion. Flash forwards depict a future decades later where Professor X has regained the ability to walk, sporting a gray uniform with the iconic X symbol. Aside from the uniform, his appearance remains consistent with his previous animated version from Evolution.
You're too hard on yourself, Scott. This will all take time.
Xavier also had a brief cameo in Origins Wolverine. Patrick Stewart reprised his role, but they needed a younger version, so he's digitally de-aged in this one, and the result isn't great, but still, he offers a sanctuary to the young mutants, including Cyclops, who were escaping from Stryker's facility. In Marvel Superheroes What The?, we see an animated action figure that closely resembles Patrick Stewart from the live-action movies in a dark suit, taking part in fun stories with other heroes and villains for comedy value, like the scene where Deadpool is fooling around or where Wolverine has him tied up trying to figure out his lost memories. In the Astonishing X-Men series, we see flashbacks of Professor X, as in this timeline he died following the events of Avengers vs. X-Men. Xavier also showed up in the episode Mysterious Mayhem at Mutant High of the Superhero Squad show in 2009. This appearance from the iconic X-Men the animated series look, but in a squished-down, chibi form. In the episode, Charles is teaching at his school where Wolverine has to return to finally finish his diploma.
So, look to this day, graduates.
Prof, there's only us. Let's wrap this up.
Unlike many of the X-Men in the Marvel anime X-Men series, Charles's look remains pretty normal with a dark suit like the live-action movies. The Professor reforms the team after the death of Jean Grey, taking them to Japan to thwart the U-Men who have kidnapped armor and are harvesting organs from young mutants.
Have you ever heard of the Sasaki Academy? It's all right. Just curious.
Despite Patrick Stewart's standout performances in the role of Xavier, Fox wanted to go back and explore the origins of the X-Men, so they brought in James McAvoy to play the young Charles Xavier, showing his journey to becoming the Professor, set during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He faces off against the Hellfire Club, and in a poignant moment, he gets hit by a stray bullet caused by his friend Eric, who is becoming Magneto, and becomes paralyzed at the end of the movie. It's weird to see Xavier with hair and walking, and even donning a classic-style yellow and blue X-suit as the team comes together. Out of his work attire, he still likes to dress sharp.
I suppose I am a real professor now, aren't I? Next thing you know, I'll be going bald.
Charles also popped up in Iron Man Armored Adventures in 2012. In a brief cameo at the Tomorrow Academy, Professor Charles Xavier sought out Jean Grey to discuss a special school he oversees for mutants. To prove the sincerity of his intentions, he showcased his abilities, convincing Jean to accept his offer with enthusiasm. We don't get to see his face. Rumor has it the 3D model was the same as Obadiah Stane's. We see him from the back in his X-adored wheelchair in his standard blazer. In the end credits of 2013's The Wolverine, Xavier and Magneto stop Logan at the airport, coming to him to warn him of a new threat, which paved the way for X-Men Days of Future Past. This shouldn't be possible, but somehow he returned to try and help the X-Men once again. That movie followed in 2014, and we saw both versions of Professor X on screen together for the first time. Young Charles, played again by McAvoy, has abandoned his powers in favor of being able to walk again, while old Charles, played by Stewart, sends Logan back in time to recruit his younger self to prevent a future where Sentinels destroy everything to wipe out mutants once and for all. The scene where the two Xaviers are telepathically talking to one another is a great way to get both actors on screen together, sharing this adored character and both bringing different things to the table.
You still believe?
Just because someone stumbles, loses their way, it doesn't mean they're lost forever. Sometimes we all need a little help.
A further anime appearance followed in 2014 with Marvel Disc Wars: The Avengers. Xavier appears in several episodes in a supporting role, helping heroes achieve their goals, including a collaboration with longtime frenemy Magneto in X-Men to Loki's castle, as he tries to save mutants from the Sentinels. His look is inspired by many of the previous appearances, with a stripped-back wheelchair complete with X marks on the wheels, a dark suit and tie, and a red blanket, also adorned with the X symbol on the back, keeping his legs warm. Safe to say this is intended to be an older representation of the character. From old back to young with 2016's X-Men Apocalypse, where James McAvoy returned. Now without his hair, having finally lost it, and fully embracing his disability in favor of having full use of his powers and donning a blue suit, he leads the X-Men as they try to stop a seemingly unstoppable force, Apocalypse. Charles has to fight him on the astral plane to try and stop him, whilst his team keep him occupied in the physical world.
I'm on a beach in Cuba with you.
Marvel's TLDR was the next appearance of the Professor, as he showed up in several slimmed-down retellings of Marvel's biggest comic book stories in simple animations. The stories included Avengers vs. X-Men, which killed the character, as well as the Dark Phoenix saga. Logan, which came out in 2017, was perhaps Patrick Stewart's most outstanding performance as Charles. Despite not being involved in the action, we saw him being cared for by Logan as a very old and very senile man, losing his mind and approaching death, yet still guiding Logan to do the right thing.
Fuck off, Logan.
So you remember who I am now?
I always know who you are. It's just sometimes I don't recognize you.
In a hilarious moment in Deadpool 2, we see Charles, played by McAvoy, along with his students in the mansion as Deadpool is remarking he never sees the famous mutants to Colossus. They quickly shut the door, implying they just don't want to see Deadpool, but they very much do exist in his universe. In the third and final season of Legion, which aired in 2019, we finally got to see Xavier, who is Legion's father. In flashback scenes, Charles is beginning his journey towards becoming the Professor, building Cerebro, and becoming entwined in his own plotline as David attempts to travel through time to reach him. In the show, Charles Xavier is portrayed by Harry Lloyd. Before Lloyd's casting, Dan Stevens, the series' star, mentioned on The Late Late Show with James Corden that he extended an invitation to Patrick Stewart to reprise his role as Professor X from the X-Men film series. Stewart declined the offer, despite being a fan of the idea.
It's hard to hate someone you understand.
McAvoy returned again in 2019's Dark Phoenix, again shaving his head to achieve the classic look. In this retelling of the Dark Phoenix story, Xavier reveals he has suppressed Jean's mind, which leads to the death of Raven, Xavier's longtime friend and sometimes enemy, when Jean's Phoenix powers take over. Charles then has to try and stop Magneto from killing Jean, helped by the rest of the team, preventing the alien debris from using the Phoenix Force to invade the Earth.
Have you come to kill me too?
Never. I failed you, I know that, but this isn't you.
Sir Patrick Stewart finally played Charles in the MCU in 2022's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. This version is a member of the Illuminati from Earth 838, and the look is clearly inspired by the X-Men the Animated Series version of the character, including the big, bulky yellow hover chair from the show. Sadly, he gets wiped out by Wanda along with the rest of the Illuminati.
Stephen, should you manage to escape this chamber, you must guide America Chavez, save the girl, and get to the Book of Vishanti. We will see what kind of Doctor Strange you are.
X-Men 97 confirms that the Professor wasn't killed at the end of X-Men the Animated Series. He was saved by Lilandra and taken to live with the Shi'ar. His golden regal suit, which helps him to walk, is a new look for Charles in animated shows, but he's happy to turn teacher when he needs to diffuse some tension and prevent a Shi'ar power struggle. That is, until the attack on Genosha, which causes Charles to turn away from his proposed marriage to Lilandra and return to Earth to rejoin his X-Men and help in the wake of the destruction of so many mutants. Everything builds to a final showdown with Magneto, with Charles having to enter Magneto's mind to pull him out of a rage that led him to bring Logan to the brink of death, with flashbacks to the first time they revealed to each other that they were mutants while serving as medics together. The Professor is ultimately successful, but as the world is saved from doom, Charles, Magneto, and the rest of the X-Men are swept off through time by an unknown culprit, finding themselves in ancient Egypt, with Charles being carried by Beast with no hover chair to ride in.